Dare I say this? Things seem to be going pretty well with the gay rights movement. We're seeing same-sex marriage being legalized in an increasing number of nations. It's actually legalized recently in some countries by popular vote. But this positive momentum isn't ubiquitous. We have to face how far the world as a whole must come still. And you know what? By taking a look at some of the worst and topical areas for the gay rights movement, I figured out a lot about the nature of outright homophobia and what it is society must overcome. This isn't my usual fun facts video, but I've learned a lot from researching this, so stick with me for a bit, and hopefully I can show you too. So let me try to share and inform you a little bit more about what happens if you're a homosexual in Uganda. To begin, here's something from the mouth of Uganda's Minister for Ethics, Simon Lokodo. We have laws that govern the society, and they're very clear. Uganda is not a home for homosexuals. These homos are everywhere, in schools, churches, families, government institutions, villages. Oh, they are everywhere. Now my commitment is to fight them. Even if I remain alone, I will not give up this fight. So here's the question. What happens if you're gay in Uganda? The answer? Well, if Lokoto's words gave a hint, then gather round this core to understanding homophobia. Let's start by looking at Uganda's law and homosexuality. Uganda's penal code makes unnatural acts illegal with punishments up to a life sentence. What's an unnatural act? Guess that depends on the interpreter. Too bad that ambiguity and laws don't work well together. 2 years ago, the Anti-Homosexuality Act was signed by Uganda's current president. It cleared up the Penal Code Act counting homosexuality as a crime and in some cases worthy of a life sentence in prison. In its original version, it suggests the death penalty for attempts at gay marriage. The worst part? It passed illegally, lacking the right number of lawmakers to vote. So what does a homosexual in Uganda do? Face persecution, life imprisonment, substantial fines? Let's be thankful that isn't what the people of Uganda did. The gay rights organization Sexual Minorities Uganda, or SMUG for short, took legal action, eventually getting the law ruled null by Uganda's constitutional court. But the struggle for defending equality continues. Late in 2014, the Prohibition of Promotion of Unnatural Sexual Practices bill was leaked online. If this passed, homosexuals can be arbitrarily imprisoned for up to 7 years. Since its discovery, SMUG has been raising awareness about the bill, doing everything they can to prevent its arrival. So far, no word of it being passed. But that doesn't do much for what's wrong here. The law is ambiguous, and that fact has given rise to police brutality. Some reports of this go as far as to describe men being forcibly examined in places I don't want to mention. Several people reported to Ugandan journalists in the report, "Where do we go for justice?" that they were harassed by police into signing self-incriminating statements. The police have been known to raid, and politicians freely state this, gay rights workshops. Minister of Ethics Lokoto, when asked about a gay rights parade in an interview with the Red Pepper tabloid, bragged, "Upon getting intelligence of these shameless idiots were planning a march in Kampala, I reached out to the police for personnel and immediately we raided them. We found them in the middle of a meeting planning to sin. We immediately stopped them and dispersed the meeting." Occasionally, police and government officials have been successfully sued for violating the freedom of assembly. But this is a rarity. In one extreme case of this example, Lokoto himself once tried to ban 38 civil rights groups, accusing them of recruiting children into homosexuality. So, this is what the police and state would do to you. I wish it ended there, because the state is not what anyone homosexual in Uganda has to fear the most. Imagine you hide your sexuality. You avoid civil rights movements and organizations. Would that grant you safety? Maybe from the police, but only them. The Rolling Stone tabloid once published an infamous article titled, "100 Pictures of Uganda's Top Homos Leaked." In an interview with The Guardian, Stosh Mugisha described the immediate result of the article. She was sitting in an internet cafe when it was carried into the shop. Immediately people started pointing, she said. She hurried out, and when she arrived home, she found her neighbors ready with stones in their hands. Stosh Mugisha was disowned by her family. She took her first opportunity she could to move far away. The paper's editor said this, "Homosexuality is illegal in Uganda, but no one is taking action against these people. It is my duty to expose evil in our society. Other countries have capital punishment to stop drug traffickers. We should have the same for homosexuals. They are recruiting new members among our kids and destroying the moral fabric of our country." SMUG took legal action against the paper. They left the court with a victory, but 1 week after, David Kato, who was identified in the article and was an advocacy officer for SMUG, was bludgeoned to death in his own home. He reported increased harassment immediately after the article's release. Pew Research published a survey on international attitudes towards homosexuality in 2009. In Uganda, of the 1,122 Ugandans surveyed, 1,077 believed homosexuality should be socially and legally rejected. Hate parades are common, as are public speeches from politicians condemning homosexuality. Tabloids named Red Pepper and Rolling Stone publish aggressively homophobic headlines, and in a recent interview published by the Red Pepper, Simon Lokoto made a false claim that he fights homosexuals for his own safety. He claims to face death threats and even threats of rape, a story I find difficult to believe, especially considering later in the same article he claimed homosexual recruits are rewarded with chunks of money, and that the police now have access to a gadget or machine that will detect homos and porn actors. How can he explain such a ridiculous invention? Well, the South Koreans are going to program it, he said, and very soon we will ship it into the country and all the evil will be busted. As for public speaking and rallies, American activist, author, and well-known homophobe Scott Lively was a frequent visitor and speaker in Uganda. This is the same guy who wrote The Pink Swastika, a book which suggests that German Nazism was primarily a homosexual movement. A lot of Western journalists have suggested speakers like Scott Lively have effectively lost their homophobic battle in their own countries and have begun to move elsewhere to spread their bigoted messages. Some at Smug have said homophobia in Uganda has increased significantly since 2009, around the same time as the beginning of visits from the likes of Scott Lively. Lively is currently being sued in American courts by Smug for being a notable figure in encouraging the 2014 Anti-Homosexual Act in Uganda. He recently pleaded on his website for increased support from the American public due to his lack of funds. I don't think I need to say it at this point, but please don't fund his livelihood. And there's something to note about his post. This is how I describe the case. This is very much a David versus Goliath case. I am one against many. Lively, almost exactly the same as Lokoto, describes himself as being on the defense, fighting against an LGBT agenda and trying to save children from homosexuality. This is the rhetoric I've noticed from all of this. Homosexuality is treated as a blight, one manipulative, and gay culture is thought of as some kind of machine sucking in innocent youth. Lively and Lokoto would have you believe we're facing a grave threat, and it's the duty of the public to stand for their own safety. The duty of the public to stand for their own safety. So what happens if you're a homosexual in Uganda? The short answer? A struggle, a constant one. You're not allowed to hide, you're not allowed many friends. But that's why it's necessary to struggle. And if no one had struggled, the Anti-Homosexual Act of 2014 would have struck. Tabloids would still be publicly shaming homosexuals, and who knows how much worse it would be. I said there was a lesson in all of this, didn't I? Click here to subscribe for more videos.